When I first played Dramatical Murder, Noise was hands down my favorite character, route, and everything. But after playing Dramatical Murder 4 years later as an adult versus a teenager, I attributed my growth as a person as to why my love of certain routes and characters has changed. A close friend of mine once asked me why I made such a drastic switch over from loving Noise and almost hating Koujaku to now loving Koujaku and still loving Noise, just not nearly to the same degree I once had. My answer is this. A lot of what I admired about Noise's character was most likely a direct result of where I was in life. When I was 15, I was pretty introverted and jaded. I had this I'm a weirdo mentality that Jughead and a lot of teenagers share. I saw Noise as a young yet still adult who happened to share my views. I could easily relate to his demeanor, and even though his character development happens as a result of opening up and taking better care of yourself, I somehow managed to skim over that. Successfully missing the point that his introverted and jaded nature that I shared was meant to be a negative thing, and that once he rid himself of his piercings and his hacker job, he was able to make amends with his family and become quote-unquote normal, which was to show Alba in a somewhat drastic way that he was a serious adult who wanted Alba to further in his journey in relating with others, which makes me love Noise, but much differently. When I lost that relatability, playing this game again as an adult, a very interesting happened. I love Noise, but I can see from jump that he was very bratty and strange. Not a direct result of his aesthetic. Piercings don't dictate how mature you are, but eating pizza and pasta daily and avoiding others kinda is. On the opposite spectrum, when I first played Dramatical Murder, Koujaku was an adult. He had a job and he loved sleeping around and having drinks with his friends. He had a past and he was goofy, but also very protective of his childhood friend. I didn't drink when I was younger, obviously, and I wasn't working or had any will to be sexually active. I had a past, but not one that defined who I was yet, and I had friends, but none that I had until adulthood. It was much harder for me to appreciate Koujaku as a character, and especially as a person. He seemed overbearing and a jerk because he slept around and couldn't just admit that he loved Alba. To me, that all seemed simple and obvious, and of course, they were to someone who'd never gone through any of that. So when I played through a second time as someone who drinks on occasion and has a full-time job and has friends they still have around even after high school, it was a hell of a lot easier to understand Koujaku, especially on the most fundamental aspect of his character, his love for Alba, also his coming out story. Though Koujaku doesn't have a canon sexuality, as a bisexual, I understand the conflict of always having an attraction to the opposite sex, and then occasionally falling in love with someone of the same sex. It's hard to admit to them and even yourself that you fantasize about them or are close to them but never feel close enough. So I developed a whole new appreciation for him, and just based off of a couple similar real-life experiences, he felt real. Noise feels real, but in a scarier sense. It's not healthy to eat pizza and pasta every day, and to get involved in gangs and isolate yourself from people just because you can't understand them. Noise has more of an excuse than I had, but loving his demeanor probably played a huge part in why I didn't have a lot of friends, and only made friends with people who had similar interests to me, and never tried to venture out. Granted, the visual novel takes many steps to show that Noise develops as a person after Alba's influence. My only problem is that if you don't romance him, he could very well be this way forever. Koujaku is jaded, but he managed to return to Midori-jima and be close to Alba and try to maintain a life even when the demons always lurk within him. When the events of the story take place and you venture on his route, Alba's fear of not knowing Koujaku quite as well as he once did is something I can relate to and worry about constantly. That if I change in the next couple of years, what friends will I still have if we're no longer the same people? What do? The route addresses a lot that Koujaku is still the same person, just with a lot more baggage, who is looking for revenge and an end to a life he doesn't think he deserves. Luckily, I can't relate to that bit, but by the time the route addresses it, I'm already invested with Koujaku not just as a character, but also as a person, and I care about what happens to him, as I do all the other boys in Dramatical Murder. Koujaku fits the criteria of the kind of people I want in my life. Passionate, funny, sensitive to others, and really good looking. He's gentle and kind, but not afraid to joke around, and is honestly just a huge dork from beneath his suave exterior. I put up a front of being happy-go-lucky and that I have no attachments, but I feel deeply for certain people and certain things, and I'm harder on myself than anyone could be. He's aesthetically perfect and a good boy, and I love him. I encourage all of you watching to find something you used to enjoy and try to understand why you feel differently about it years later. The answer could shock you and give you a better understanding of who you are as a person and what you value in others. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. I don't fit in, and I don't want to fit in. Have you ever seen me without this stupid hat on? That's weird.